tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hey friends, in this talk I want to kind of carry on from the talk I gave yesterday on the purification of view. And this is part of the 7 stages of purification that was expounded in the Ratavinita Sutta. And probably one of the most important parts in the purification of view, we saw that everything in the world is basically a process of mind recognizing matter, or nama rupa. And this is a difficult concept for an ordinary person to understand. And that's why Dhamma isn't just ordinary type of knowledge. And in today's meditation, I was mentioning to try to focus on intention. Because the body is one thing, let's say, and the mind is another. They're not really, but just for the sake of trying to explain. So we have this material body, but by itself it can't do anything. It needs the mind to do something. So it's dependent on the mind to carry out the desires of the mind. And the mind is what has the desires, and the body is just a vehicle for the mind to satisfy its desires. So the mind has a desire to eat, but the mind can't eat itself. So it tells the body, hey, chew this, swallow this, or, I want to go here, turn to the left, turn to the right. So it's the mind that drives the body. And because the mind can't express itself in the world by itself, it needs the body. So body and mind are said to be, they work in tandem, the body-mind process. And there's a nice little simile given. It's a simile of a person who cannot walk, let's say a crippled person who cannot walk, and a blind person that cannot see. So the blind person gets up on the shoulders, the crippled person gets up onto the shoulders of the blind person. And the crippled person has eyes, good eyes. So the crippled person says, turn to the left. And then the blind person turns to the left. Then the crippled person says, turn to the right. And so, like that, they can easily go. So in that way, that is how the body and mind process is seen to be. And so that's part of the right view, understanding that this is just the process of materiality and mentality that are helping to support each other, carrying on this process of life. But the average person thinks it's me or I that's doing these things. but actually it's just the process of Namarupa, conditioned by the past experience, and conditioned and fueled by the karma, the past karma. So now we talked about the purification of the view, and the next purification is called purification by overcoming doubts. Because even though a person might still have, some kind of right view, they can still take, they still can have the self view, or take this body and mind to that they're the doer. Because everyone thinks that, they're the doer. I am doing this, I am doing this, I'm deciding this, I'm deciding that, I like this, I like that. And so they think they're actually in control. But from the Dhamma point of view, ultimately, this sense of I am doing or owning or controlling this body-mind process is an illusion. And the process can go on by itself quite well without an I. Of course, that's something very difficult for people to understand. Because it's under the power of the past karma. And the overcoming doubts, sometimes people have doubts about what is the nature of this body-mind, what happens after death, where did it come from? When I was born, was this the first time this mind all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere and started to be a person? So, a lot of people have doubts about that. Or when you die, if you die and the mind still has lots of ego and greed and attachments, does that mind just go poof and disappear? So a lot of people are in confusion about that. So the purification by overcoming doubts is the further examination of this process of mind and matter to get some a deeper clarity on the fact that there's no self or I that really owns or controls this process. And it's said that the process of the mind, the first origination of a being, or the first arising of life, is not known. And the process of life in the mind has been going on since the beginningless time. And there's no first point in time that the first minds or egos have arisen. Of course, in some religions, they have a nice little theory that, the earth and human beings were created in, 7 days on a particular day, and so on. But within the Dhamma, the Buddha said there's no such point like that. So that this mind has been under the influence of greed, hatred, and delusion, basically, since we call beginningless time, because the first point in time is not known. And most of you who are Buddhists, you probably believe in the process of rebirth. And so since beginningless time, this mind has been going through the rounds of rebirth, or samsara, over and over, countless number of times, being born in different realms, sometimes as a human being, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as in the formless realm, sometimes in the Deva realms, so many different planes of existence. But again, it's the mind with its desires and ignorance, greed, and hatred that is the fuel to keep driving that wheel of birth and death. So when a person dies, whether by accident or by old age, it is said that the mind leaves the body, and again, the body needs another body to continue its desires. Yes. Yeah. So the mind needs a body to fulfill its desires. So if you die and there's still desires in the mind and the ego, then it'll seek out existence in another realm in order to be able to express itself. And so, according to the karma that have been accumulated in the past, that karma is sort of carried over, and that mind, the last thought in the mind when a person dies, it is said that the seed of karma that it had accumulated, the sum total of that, is somehow carried over to another existence. If it has the karma to be born as a human being, then it will seek out a new womb to be born in. Or as an animal, it will seek out an animal. Or if it's in a deva realm, a heavenly realm, because of good karma, it will spontaneously arise in one of a number of various heaven realms, or even hell realms. And again, all that's dependent on the karma, but I'm not going to go into all that right now. But so I know this is a very deep subject, and I want to kind of keep it a little bit as simple as possible. So anyway, this process of mind and matter. So the mind, acquires another form in order to go on living. And then it accumulates more karma in that next life. And then it dies again. And then again, depending on that karma, it will be born in a happy sphere or a painful sphere. And it keeps on going on ad infinitum until one attains enlightenment and brings that to an end. But again, it's not the same person that is born again, because even our mind, we're not even the same person now. You might be 30 years old, 50 years old, or older, but you're a different person, every day, because you've acquired new knowledge, new experiences. So it's not the identical person that's even the same each day, because somehow one has changed in one way or another. So in the same way, if you're not even the same person, there's a continuity, of course, but it's said to be is not the same person. And so when you die, the same thing is this mind leaves this body, it arises in another existence, but it's not the same person. But nor is it entirely different, because there is a continuity. But we don't call that a soul or any kind of permanent entity that goes from life to life. It is simply this stream of consciousness. And even that consciousness is not a solid stream. It's arising and vanishing very quickly. So it vanishes from this life, from the dead person, and arises in the womb or in another existence immediately or soon after that. So, but that process again is fueled by the karma. And so this is part of the overcoming doubts. Actually, the purification by overcoming doubts is the contemplation of paticca samuppada, that you contemplate the forward and reverse orders of the paticca samuppada. And I've already given lectures on the paticca samuppada before, but I'll kind of just try to go through it fairly brief. So basically, it's dependent on ignorance. So ignorance basically is not knowing the truth. And ignorance has been in the universe again since beginningless time. And again, the first point of ignorance arising is not knowing. It is said the Buddha, with his psychic power, he could remember his past lives because his mind was so purified. And he could go back 1 life, 2 lives, 3 lives, 10, 100,000, 100,000 lives, 100,000 world cycles of involution and evolution, looking for that first point of existence, and he couldn't find it. He said, enough is enough. No need to look further.
I get the picture.
And so he said, beginningless time. 1 or 2 years. So, and he saw that in all those, in doing that, in remembering his past lives, he saw perfectly how karma worked, because he saw that this mind was reborn to experience the results of the karma that it had reaped in this life. And the karma that he was creating in that life caused the conditions for that life too. Both the old karma and the new karma, both were determining things that are happening in this life itself. So in this life now, especially when you are younger, a lot of karma from the previous life had been causing things to happen. It still does, but we're creating fresh karma now that also, affects us even in this life. And then when we eventually die in this life, both of those karmas from previous life, as well as the ones we're accumulating now, go to kind of affect the future. So it's usually described in 3 periods of time: past, present, and future. So the karma we created, the ignorance and the karma formations from the past have given rise to the birth in this life. And then in this life, we have craving, grasping, clinging, becoming, the karma process. We're creating more karma in this life. And then there's death. And then there's, so the ignorance and the karma that we've accumulated in this life gets projected then into the future life. And in that life, again, there's the mind and body come together. The body is born again. And then the process of mind and matter continues during that life, accumulating the karma, the craving, grasping, becoming, and then death. And then there's birth in the next life. And the whole process keeps on continuing. But again, the important part is there's no soul or entity that jumps from one life to another. Now there are some other theories that may believe like that, but the Buddha saw, because he was able to clearly see how the ego is an illusion, and it's simply the consciousness, the continuity of consciousness that is continuing on under this power of, through the power of ignorance and the accumulation of karma. So, and also, when we meditate, I mean, because this can be a subject of meditation, you know, the purification by overcoming doubts. And I spent a lot of time in my young years as a monk, you know, meditating on making the Paticca my focus of meditation, and, you know, it was very powerful. So, you know, even in one meditation, you know, you can sit down and you can think, okay, what is ignorance? You know, what is ignorance? Not knowing the truth about this mind. Not knowing the truth about how life operates. And then you say, well, what is the truth? And then you can contemplate. Of course, part of this involves some conjecture, like, how did this birth take place? So the mother and father come together and provide the material seed. But if there's no consciousness coming to join with that materiality, so the parents provide the materiality, you know, the X and Y chromosomes or whatever. But it's a mind coming from some other plane that sees this, it's attracted to a particular womb to be born into. And so it seeks it out like a heat-seeking missile, or you know, like a magnetic pull. The karma of the mind that had just died, you know, when we die, our mind, you could say, is like magnetized with, you know, a certain amount of greed, hatred, and delusion. You know, it's a kind of a magnetized energy. And it meets up with a similar type of energy from perhaps parents somewhere, a man and a woman somewhere, that there's some kind of an attraction there, knowing that that will be a womb where it'll be able to manifest its karma in the next life. In other words, it'll be able to produce the conditions to match the karma of that previous life. Again, this is, you know, kind of difficult to get your head around, I know, but so it takes a little bit of, you know, not imagination, but kind of thinking along those lines. And then some people say, well, how can that happen? How can that mind know where it should be born? And so this is where I like to give the example of a cell phone. Okay? You have a cell phone. You want to call somebody halfway around the world, you know, back in Sri Lanka. And so there's millions of cell phones in Sri Lanka, right? But you take out your phone here and you punch in 9 or 11 numbers, and within a few seconds, that some invisible energy goes out of that phone, and out of the billion cell phones, or 2 or 3 billion in the world, somehow it finds the right one to go to. There's no wires. And so, you know, it finds that number you want. So in a similar way, I mean, to me, that's more difficult to understand than rebirth. You know? So if you see it in that way, it's, oh yeah. So this magnetized energy is like those numbers going out and finding out of infinite possibilities the exact place in the back pocket of some, you know, rickshaw walla in India it finds that exact cell phone and rings. So the idea of karma and rebirth, although I know there's a lot of controversy, a lot of people don't believe it, but it's okay. But, so the number, you have a telephone number, and then every country has an area code, right? So your karmic number at the time you die, let's say all that conditioned greed, hatred, and delusion, and the memories of all the different things you've done in that life, is like your number. We call it karma number. And then the plane of existence where the mind should be born is your area code, right? You got area code 99 or 1 for America, 2 for, I don't know, Canada or whatever, 91 for India. So if you have the karma to be born in India, then it will find someplace over in India, like that cell phone, or any other country. So this is just a kind of an interesting little, an analogy, but it's because there's no way to perfectly describe how the process happens, but that's one of the kind of more contemporary and fairly easy to understand idea.
Or the law of attraction.
Yeah, it's a law of attraction. Yes. But it's all happening, with invisible energies. There's no, direct communication going on. It's like a magnetic pull. So anyway, so there's no self that's deciding where it's going to be born, although some people say that it is. But again, even the sense of ourself now is not an entity as such. It's just the consciousness. So anyway, this process keeps on going. So in the purification of overcoming doubt, you can sit down and you can think about, how you grew up and all the different things that affected you. You can also reflect on, if you don't believe in rebirth, you can reflect on all these examples of child prodigies and other types of things where young kids could do stuff that there's no way they could have learned how to do those things in 2 years in this life, like compose a Beethoven symphony or speak foreign languages and so on. Of course, skeptics can also always make reasons and excuses. But anyway, you can kind of just think about that. And then think about all the things you did during your life and the way that's affected you and how it's governed your life. The actions even you did when you were a child, how they followed you around. And the things that you do, as an adult and the various type of addictions that can lead to your death and so many other karmic interactions. And all these things accumulate that are in your mind when you die. So anyway, you can contemplate this paticca samuppada, that because of ignorance, I got born, and then this mind and body was produced. And then there's contact. So the young baby comes out of the womb and its first contact with the world. It starts hearing sounds, starts seeing things and smelling and tasting. It's totally something new. And then it gradually grows up. And then because of that contact, there's craving and grasping and desire carried over from the previous life. It regenerates in this lifetime. And you accumulate more karma, then you die. And then, right now, you all know what's in your mind, right? You have a lot of powerful, strong thoughts and emotions in your mind. Is it right to think just because you die, they're going to go poof and dissolve into nothing without any residue? I mean, sure, a skeptic can say, yeah, but, logically it doesn't make sense. So anyway, you can contemplate that, how that process will go on ad nauseum unless something is done about it. So then at a certain point, a person starts to wake up to the Dhamma and sees how they keep on repeating the same mistakes, the same thoughts over and over again, getting into the same troubles and problems. And you start to say enough is enough. And so then you encounter Dhamma. And then start to practice Dhamma. Then you start slowing down that wheel, that forward motion of samsara. As you start weakening your greed, hatred, and delusion through the process of meditation, you start slowing down that process of accumulating, especially negative karma. So it's through the practice of sila and samadhi, the purification of virtue we talked about, practice of sila. You first start to eliminate or overcome your negative actions that bring the suffering. And so you create positive ones like practicing dana and bhavana. And dana, sila, and bhavana are actually said to be the three most powerful types of good karma. And so the more of that good karma you accumulate, you stop accumulating so much, you stop doing the bad types of karma, the negative types of karma, because both can't exist at the same time. When you're doing the kusala karma, positive karma, you can't be entertaining negative thoughts or doing negative things at the exact same time. You might do something a little bit after that, but at the exact same time, you can't do both at the same time. So the more good karma you're doing, the less time there is to do the bad karma. So gradually, the good karma starts to outweigh the bad karma. And so the life starts getting, a little bit better in terms of, happiness, less problems. And then when you start to meditate, it's more easier to develop concentration and mindfulness. And then you start to learn more about the mind. You're able to see more clearly the mind. You start practicing, insight meditation, vipassana meditation, to understand the mind more deeply. And so gradually you're bringing this cycle of craving, grasping, and becoming. You're weakening those links until the point eventually when you attain